Sri Lanka is going through the worst economic crisis since its independence in 1948. I don't have to tell you how bad things are because we are all experiencing them. Still, I feel like most of us don't have a clear picture of what really caused the crisis. Was it the COVID-19 pandemic, or was it Gotabaya Rajapakse who created the crisis? And where did all those dollars go? Well, that's what we are going to find out in this video. First, a disclaimer, I'm not an economist. Yes, I have studied economics in school and at university. Still, I felt like my understanding of the crisis wasn't enough. So I read a lot of articles from experts and a couple of books on basic economics and why certain nations succeed while others fail, and that's how I came up with this explanation. There are 4 critical decisions that created the economic crisis. Yes, the economic crisis is a lot more complex, but we can mainly attribute it to 4 bad decisions that were made since 2019. These 4 decisions created a ripple effect in the economy that led us to this crisis. Let's learn what they are. The first decision is deep tax cuts that were introduced by Gotabaya Rajapakse's government in 2019. Gotabaya Rajapakse reduced taxes as soon as he became the president. Tax income is the primary income, and that's how the government can pay public sector employees and carry out public services. With the tax cuts in 2019, the Sri Lankan government lost 600 billion rupees per annum. That's like a company losing more than half of its income. That tax cut was not sustainable, but Gotabaya did it anyway against the advice of economists as well as the opposition. This is why Sri Lanka has been printing more money in the last 2 years. The central bank has printed 1.62 trillion rupees from January 2020 to March 2022. That's 23 times more than the money printed during the 62 years from 1952 to 2020. This government has printed more money in 2 years than the total sum of money printed in the past 62 years. That's how crazy it is. This reckless money printing has led to hyperinflation in Sri Lanka, with prices skyrocketing. The inflation for the month of June 2022 as of this recording is 54%. The second decision is the overnight ban of chemical fertilizer. When Sri Lanka's foreign currency shortages became a severe problem in 2021, the government tried to limit them by banning imports of chemical fertilizer. Even a kid can understand that a large industry such as agriculture, which has relied on chemical fertilizer for years, cannot adopt organic fertilizer overnight. It has to be a gradual process. Things like these take 5 to 10 years to sometimes even 20 years. When a country is planning such a drastic change, you plan for 10 to 20, 30 years down the line. You don't do it the next day. But that's what Goat and his government did. That decision alone ruined the entire agricultural industry in Sri Lanka. And it didn't stop from there, because Sri Lanka had to import essential foods such as rice, which put even more burden on the foreign currency shortage. It also hurt tea and rubber exports, according to an IMF report. And don't forget the loss we had to incur after getting a ship full of toxic organic fertilizer from China. We had to pay for it, and we didn't even get any first fertilizer at the end. The third decision is not going to IMF assistance at the end of 2019. With the impact of COVID-19, losing government income and foreign currency shortage, many economists and the opposition saw what was coming. They begged the government to seek IMF assistance, but Gotabaya, Mahinda and Basil didn't listen. Vasudeva said he'll kill himself instead of going to IMF assistance. By the time they realized it, it was obviously too late. Ali Sabri, the finance minister for a month or two, accepted that their government made a grave mistake by not going to IMF earlier. The next mistake was holding the USD exchange rate at 23 arbitrarily. This completely stopped all foreign employee remittances as well as export income proceedings. Why? Because when the actual rate was supposed to be much higher, a Sri Lankan sending money could only get 203 rupees from a local bank. That's why most of them started sending their money through the black market to get a higher rate. This also created the capital float, and Sri Lanka was further downgraded in international ratings. Ali Sabri again accepted that the rupee should have been allowed to depreciate stage by stage much earlier before they abruptly floated the rupee. Right, so what caused the crisis? Is it the COVID-19 pandemic? I'm not saying there wasn't some bad luck, but we could have overcome the effects of COVID-19 if it weren't for the stupid decisions that were deliberately made by this government. So, is Goat at fault? Definitely, 100%. There's no doubt. I'm not saying this because I don't like Gota. He accepted it publicly, and he is not resigning because he doesn't want to live as a failed leader. Not my words, his words. But is he alone in this? Nope. Not only them, economic assassins like Ajit Niwan Kabral, cronies like Vimal, Udaya, Aturliya, Ratana, Padiniya, Vasudev and all the ministers, advisors and the entire government is responsible for this economic crisis. Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna as a party is responsible for this crisis. I see certain people justifying Gota saying that he was misled by his advisors. My answer to them is, if he is so gullible, he is not a good leader. And he should take full responsibility because he is the president in Sri Lanka after all. Also, we shouldn't forget the impact of international rating agencies downgrading Sri Lanka. The rating downgrading started when Maithripala Sirisena in 2018 dismissed Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe, creating a constitutional crisis. Then rating agencies concerned about government finances and its inability to repay large foreign debt downgraded Sri Lanka's credit ratings during Gotabaya's time, eventually locking the country out of international financial markets. Sri Lanka's debt management program depended on accessing those markets. After losing access, our foreign exchange reserves plummeted by almost 70% in 2 years, and they eventually came to almost zero according to Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe. So if you are wondering what happened to all the dollars, that's what happened. Because of the terrible decisions made by this government, our outflow was higher than the inflow, and with the downgrading of ratings, we lost access to new funds. We had to use the foreign reserves, and now we have run out. And eventually Sri Lanka defaulted on servicing debt payments for the very first time in its history because we ran out of foreign reserves. Basically, we are a bankrupt nation right now, and we have been borrowing money from India and other countries since then. Right, so that's how the economic crisis in 2020 was created. Let me remind you the 4 decisions. First, Gotabaya cut down the taxes, then banned chemical fertilizer. Third, delayed going to IMF assistance against all expert advice, and finally, they pegged the dollar at 23 rupees, increasing the dollar shortage even further. These decisions created a ripple effect that led us to where we are right now. That's what you see on the surface. But to understand what really caused the crisis, we need to look deeper. We must understand why Gotabaya and his government made such terrible decisions against all expert advice. We must understand what gave them the absolute power to do whatever they want. That's the real problem in Sri Lanka, and it concerns how our political and economic institutions are structured. Watch the following video in this series to learn what's wrong with our political and economic institutions. If you know anyone who's still confused about what caused this economic crisis, share this video with them. You might be doing a favor to this country. So until my next video, Aragaleta Jai Veva.